lecture by today, the topic by today, and then tomorrow I wish to talk about magnetotelluric method, and then in the pre-recorded lecture, I will need two lectures where I will teach about geothermics. Okay, and then next Wednesday, either we will finish. I mean, there will be some things left with geothermics, maybe, or yeah, perhaps that is what the scenario will be. And then, of course, I will take questions. So I will keep the lecture short on next Wednesday, where I'll and then maybe half of the class I will leave. I mean, keep for questions and answers, and hopefully, I'm not too sure, but most likely that will be your last lecture on this course. Because so I need one lecture today that is for resistivity survey, then the one lecture for magnetotelluric method, and two lectures on geothermics. So that would essentially be next Wednesday this time, and then I will send you, of course, maybe Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, I will send you a questionnaire for quiz. Yeah, so that will be the last quiz of also for this course, and then we will have our final examination, which is scheduled on, I think, 3rd of December, if I am not wrong. Okay, so that's the plan. You have any questions on or comments? So you will have enough time to refresh your things before next Monday. If you have, sorry, next Wednesday, if you have any question from any topic that I have explained, I mean, we have gone through, starting from plate tectonics, gravity, magnetics, seismic, and the things that we are going to, and the well logging, petrophysics, and of course the topics that I'm covering today. I mean, next 4 lectures. Okay, so anything that you need clarifications on, it will be your time on next Wednesday where you can get it clarified as well. Okay, so I will keep the lecture on the Wednesday, next Wednesday, little shorter. Okay, so with that,
Sir, what will be the format for the end sem?
so for EndSem will have both your multiple choice as well as subjective questions. Okay, it will be online, of course. I'm not too sure if there will be some instructions sent by the institute already. It will be, and we have to stick to that. I'm not too sure how is it going to be, but if it is uh, up to me, then it will still be again a Google form where, of course, everything will not be short. I mean, tick marks. Okay, multiple choice. There will be subjective questions. There will be numericals to be solved where you have to, write down the answer and everything. Okay, so you have to do solve the questionnaire, and yeah, so it's not going to be only multiple choice. That much I can tell you. Whatever the format is. Okay.
And sir, the
Okay.
time window?
Time window, I'm not too sure if are there any instructions around it.
Uh, Sir, the only instruction that we got is we can have the exam anytime within the 24-hour time period.
Okay, so yeah, so I will give you around 5 hours for all the questions. Okay, if it is up to me, but if there is another instruction from the institute that I have to conduct it in 3 hours, 2 hours, then I have to change the plan accordingly. Otherwise, I will give you around 5 hours time. Okay,
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
but then it might change. Of course, don't quote me then that, sir, you told 5 hours. But if it is only left to me, then I will give you 5 hours. If not, then I have, if the institute asks me to do otherwise, I have to follow the rule. Okay, is that clear, Adil?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I hope you are fine with it as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, it's not going to be only multiple choice. Of course, you have to write some answers as well. Okay, so let's just begin the lecture today. Are the slides visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we are going to talk about resistivity survey today. So resistivity survey is actually an electrical method by which you actually also try to understand how the subsurface looks like. Okay, like in seismic, acoustic impedance contrast between two layers is the key in distinguishing different layers. Right, that is what we have just studied in our previous chapter. But here it's not the acoustic impedance. Here it is the electrical properties. And electrical properties being the resistivity of that particular layer. So if there are two layers or three layers or four layers which are vertically stacked and they have different electrical resistivity, we should be able to distinguish them by the resistivity survey. Okay. So that is what we are going to learn. How is it done? So the fundamentals, let me go through the slides. The electrical resistivity method is used to map the subsurface electrical electrical resistivity structure. Okay, that's what I just explained, which is interpreted by geophysicists to determine geologic structure or physical properties of the geologic materials. Okay, because sandstone will have a different resistivity, shell will have a different resistivity. If the sandstone is filled with oil and gas, it will have a different resistivity. If it is filled with water, it will have a different resistivity. Okay, so depending on the rock as well as its fluid content, the resistivity changes. And if you can actually find a way to distinguish them, you should be able to also get a layered picture of the earth where with different resistivities. Okay, so that's the fundamental. The electrical resistivity of a geological unit or target is measured in ohm-meter, right? And is a function of porosity, permeability, water saturation, and the connection and the concentration of dissolved solid in pore fluid within the subsurface. Okay. So porosity and permeability, what does it do? Porosity is the void space inside a material, right? We talked about porosity in the petrophysics class. I hope you have studied about it. So porosity means if I have higher porosity, the chances of fluid inside that rock is more. I mean, you have more fluid in the rock if it is a porous rock. Okay. Now, what sort of fluid is inside? Okay, whether it is water, whether it is oil or gas, that also determine its resistivity. Okay. Now, say for example, if I have water, if I have fresh water, yeah, it is it's somewhat conductive. Okay, if the dissolved salt starts to increase in them, it starts to ionize the fluid, and your conductivity increases. Right. So dissolved salt essentially increases conductivity. And then, of course, if it is not water, if it is oil or gas, the resistivity increases because oil and gas, they are poor conductor of electricity, right? So the resistivity increases. So it will not only depend on the lithology of that particular rock unit, it will also depend on the fluid, whatever is resting inside the porous space. Okay. So electrical resistivity methods measure the bulk resistivity of the subsurface, as do the electromagnetic methods. We will study electromagnetic methods in tomorrow's class. Okay. The difference between these two methods is in the way that electrical currents are forced to flow in the earth. Okay. We will see the resistivity method we will see the resistivity method today and the electromagnetic method or the magnetotelluric method tomorrow. You will see in the resistivity method, you actually uh, create your own current. I mean, you generate some potential difference, and because of that potential difference, there is a cathode placed, there is an anode placed within the ground, and because of the potential difference, there is a forced electricity that flows through the ground. Whereas in the magnetotelluric method or in the electromagnetic method, we depend on the natural electromagnetic waves. Okay, and we will see what electromagnetic stuff does tomorrow. Okay? In the electrical resistivity method, current is injected into the ground through surface electrodes. Okay? Whereas in the electromagnetic methods, currents are induced by the application of time varying magnetic field. Don't be too bothered about what exactly time varying magnetic field, what electromagnetic methods does, because we will read it tomorrow. But if we just concentrate on the first line, in the electrical resistivity method, current is injected into the ground through surface electrodes. So we will have some cathodes and anodes within the surface, and then we will pass some current through the ground. Okay. So what are the advantages? The principal advantage of the electrical resistivity method is that is that quantitative modeling is possible using either computer software or published master curve. We will see what master curves are. So quantitative modeling of the subsurface is possible. We will see what quantitative modeling is all about. Uh, the resulting model can provide accurate estimates of depth, thickness, and electrical resistivity of subsurface layers. I don't think I have to explain it more. It's fairly intuitive. The layered electrical resistivities can then be used to estimate the electrical resistivity of the saturating field, which is related to the total concentration of dissolved solid in the fluid. Okay? The point that I had just explained. Now, what are the limitations? Limitations of using the electrical resistivity method in groundwater pollution investigations are largely due to site characteristics rather than in inherent limitations of the method. Okay, because but does it mean that you cannot do electrical resistivity survey everywhere? Right? Say for example, if that area is extremely populated, yeah, it is very difficult to carry out such survey. Okay. Uh, Say for example, you cannot do an electric resistivity survey inside a city. Okay, you have to go away from it. Okay. Typically, sites are located in the industrial area that contains the abundance of broad spectrum electrical noise. And why is that? Because of course, you want to catch the signal that is coming from the electrodes itself, from the and which is actually a response of the resistivity of the earth's material. Right now, if an area is already too much electrified, say for example, if you go in Bhopal city and try to do a resistivity method, what would you see? Below the ground, maybe up to 10 meters, you have pipelines, you have and the pipelines are generally made up of steel, so they are conductive, right? And then you have electrical circuits beneath the ground. There are telephone wires beneath the ground. So all these things will hamper the quality of the signal that is coming out from them. Okay, and it will be almost impossible to actually carry out the resistivity survey where the current that you are sending through your electrodes are truly representative, are actually going through the actual Earth's material. So the problem is often the sites of interest, at least the topsoil in those sites of interest, are completely full with anthropogenic disturbances, right? And it becomes very difficult to carry out the survey. In conducting an electrical resistivity survey, the voltages are relayed to the receiver over long wires that are grounded at each end. Okay, these wires act as antenna, receiving the radiated electrical noise that in turn degrades the quality of the measured voltage. What I just explained to you. Okay, uh, we will go through the rest of the limitations in a moment. But before that, let us just see what that survey does. Okay, and you understand the configuration, then you will appreciate the limitations and advantage bit more. So we will come back to this particular slide in just a moment. Okay. So let's see what sort of instrumentation is done in case of a electrical resistivity survey. So electrical resistivity survey instrumentation system basically consists of a transmitter and a receiver. The transmitter supplies low frequency, typically 0.15 to 1 cycle per second or hertz, current waveform that is applied across the current electrodes. Okay. So very low frequency current is actually sent through this transmitter. Either batteries or an external generator, depending on the power requirement, can supply power to the transmitter. Okay. In most cases, the power requirements for most commonly used electrode arrays, uh, such as Schlumberger. So Schlumberger is a company which actually provides such survey. And Wiener arrays, we'll see what Schlumberger array, what Wiener arrays are minimal, and the power supplied by battery pack is sufficient. Okay. Other electrode configurations such as dipole-dipole arrays, we will see what dipole-dipole arrays are in a moment, generally require more power and often necessitating the use of power generator. Okay. The sophistication of receivers range from simple analog voltmeters to microcomputer controlled systems that provide signal enhancement, stacking, and digital data storage capability. Most systems have digital storage data. Okay. I don't think I have to explain what does this mean. Some systems may require the field parameters to be input via personal computers to prior to the collection of the data. The trend in manufacturers of resistivity equipment is to have the entire system controlled from a personal computer, uh, pre-programmed software built into the instrument. The good news is, ISAT Bhopal, we are going to buy this whole resistivity survey thing, and that is going to be the first geophysical instrument of our position. Hopefully, till you graduate, we will have the instrument, and I plan actually to do some, at least, maybe some MSc thesis uh, with the resistivity work later on. Otherwise, also, I mean, we can all do some surveys later on. I mean, you are still here for another 2.5 years, I guess. By that time, the instrument will come, and it will be fun to test it out with you guys and do some real surveys and do some measurements, okay, and interpret the data. So it will be fun. So survey design, procedure, and quality assurance. Survey design depends on the specific characteristics of the site and the objective of the study. The three most common methods of electrical resistivity surveying are profiling, sounding, and profiling sounding. We will see what are they, each having their own specific purposes. If the purpose of the survey is to map depth and thickness of stratigraphic units, then electrical resistivity data can be collected in the sounding mode. Lateral electrical resistivity contrasts, such as lithological contacts, can be best mapped in the profiling mode. And in case of electrical resistivity is expected to vary both vertically and horizontally, such as in contaminant plume mapping, the preferred method is profile sounding. So in sounding, you are actually having a more vertical resolution. In profiling, you are having more lateral resolution. And in profiling sounding, you have both. The sounding mode, the two most common arrays for electrical resistivity surveying is the sounding mode are Schlumberger arrays and Wiener arrays. We will see what Schlumberger array and Wiener arrays are. Increasing separation of the outer current electrodes, thereby driving the current deeper to the subsurface, increases the depth of exploration. This is a very important point. Okay. So Schlumberger and Wiener arrays, we will see what are they. Now, if you increase the distance between the transmitter and the receiver, between these two electrodes, transmitter electrode and the receiver electrode, you will actually have a more depth of penetration of your electrical survey. If they're very closely spaced, the vertical penetration will be less. We will see that how it goes. The two most common profiling mode, the two most common electrical resistivity surveying in profiling mode are Wiener mode and dipole-dipole arrays. So we see Wiener in both in sounding as well as in profiling, and dipole-dipole arrays. The electrode geometry for Wiener array is same as the sounding mode. The difference is that in profiling mode, the entire array is moved laterally along the profile while maintaining the potential and current electrode separation distance. So now let us see. Now consider how this whole thing actually works. There are generally 4 electrode this is the general 4-electrode method. So there are actually 4 electrodes in this whole thing, okay, in any of these surveys. Okay. Consider an arrangement consisting of a pair of electrodes and a pair of pair of current electrodes and pair of potential electrodes. The current electrodes A and B are the source and the sink respectively, and the detection electrode C, the potential due to source A is rho by I 2A by RC. Okay, I'll explain this one. Let's just, so the combined UC is this. Okay, now let us see this one. Okay, so so what is happening? There are 4 electrodes. There is A, there is B, okay, and there is C, and there is D. All 4 of them are actually just grounded into the surface. Okay, so you have actually dug a small hole, and then you have put these electrodes beneath. Okay. Now, what you are doing? You are essentially sending current, you know. So through the A and B electrode. Okay. So there is a circuit which is developed. There is a circuit which is developed. Now, in C and D are my detection electrodes. In the detection electrode, I am essentially measuring so through C and D, there is no current going, okay? C and D, while I am actually transmitting through A and B, I am observing the voltage difference, okay? I have a voltmeter here. I am seeing the voltage difference. Okay? So this is essentially the configuration. The distance between A and C is RAC. The distance between C and D is okay. The distance between A and D is RAD. The distance between C and D is RCB, and the distance between D and B is RDB. Okay, that is how they are put. Okay, so the resultant potential at D is UD, which can be written as rho I by 2 pi 1 by RAD minus 1 by RDB. You know that by this simple formula that is essentially is used to calculate the potential difference. Okay. So this is the so the potential difference, the combined potential at UC at point C is UC is equals to rho I 2 pi by 1 by RAC minus 1 by RCB. And then at D, the potential difference is rho by 2 pi, rho I by 2 pi, 1 by RAD, 1 by RDB. So rho is the resistivity, I is the current that is passing through, and R are the respective distances that has been shown in this particular figure. So the potential difference measured by the voltmeter that is connected between C and D. Yeah, here I have the voltmeter, and I am seeing the potential difference will be essentially the if you just subtract UC from UD, right? That will give me the potential difference, and this is the common expression of the potential difference. Now from here I can express it in terms of rho. Okay, just simplifying the equation, I can express it in terms of rho. Okay, and you see the V is actually I'm measuring, right? You are seeing what sort of voltage I see at V. I know I because it is controlled by me, right? The I that I'm providing into the system. RAC, RCB, RAD, RDB, all of them I know. Okay, so and then I can calculate rho from this simple expression. So that will give me the resistivity of the subsurface, whatever is through which this particular current I is passing through. Is that clear for you? If you have a question, you may ask. Anyone, any question? Was it clear? The general configuration, is it clear for you? Can someone just confirm?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So this is how I can calculate my, this is the general configuration of the resistivity survey. Okay, I have 4 electrodes. They are different. They are placed at certain distances. Okay, and then I applied a particular current through a set of electrode, which we call, which we call our source and sink electrodes. They are the current electrodes, and then I have the detection electrodes. That is my C and D, where I measure my voltage difference or the potential difference. Okay, and then just by putting them in this simple formula, where V is the measured voltage difference between C and D, and the current that I am passing through the area I should be able to understand the resistivity of the subsurface. Now, the configurations that we have talked about, the profiling, sounding, Wiener configuration, Schlumberger configuration, your dipole configuration, that only varies. So this basic structure remains the same. Only the mutual distances between RAC, RCB, RAD, RDB, that is what varies. Okay, and then I will get different configurations. Okay. Now remember, if you are appearing for net exam, okay, if you are appearing for gate exam, if you are appearing for, any exam where there is some sort of geophysics, in every alternative year or almost every year, you can expect a question from this, either Schlumberger configuration or from Wiener configuration, dipole configuration. They give you either there is a numerical or there is, asking them what the configuration is all about, some tricky questions around it. The configuration we are going to explain tomorrow today, and they're very easy. But remember, this is such a commonly asked questions in any exams that you will be facing in your future. Now you see, this is Wiener configuration. So in Wiener configuration, the simple thing is RAC is equals to A is equals to, so RAC is equals to RCB is equals to RBD. So RAC is equals to A, RAD is equals to 2A, RCB is equals to 2A, RDB is equals to A. So that means all the electrodes are spaced equally. Okay, they have the same distance. Okay. Now, if we do that, in here, if we do that, that particular express RAC, RCB, RAD, RDB in terms of A, because they are all same. I will simplify my equation. Rho A is equals to 2 pi by V by A multiplied by A. Okay. The Wiener configuration becomes very simple. Okay. Now, what is about Schlumberger configuration? In Schlumberger configuration, that is not exactly the case. Now, there is a distance A, and between A and B, there is a distance L. Between C and D, there is a distance A. But the interesting thing is the midpoint. So A by 2. So the midpoint between A and D and the midpoint between C and B. Okay. A, B, C, D, okay, right? So the midpoint between A, B, C, D. That's why they thumbed up. The moment. A, B, right? So A, B, C, D. So this is A, this is B, this is C, this is D, okay? So the midpoint between A and B and the midpoint between C and D are exactly the same, okay? You understood my point, right? That is what happens in Schlumberger configuration. So now RAC is equals to L minus A by 2, RAD is equals to RCB, RCB is equal to LA plus by 2, RDB is equals to RAC. Okay, and then if we just simplify this equation, I will find out the value. Okay. And in case of dipole, this is when the picture is put, it is more understandable. So the distance between A and B, you can see, is A, but then the detection electrodes are not exactly placed there. Okay, it is placed at a distance L between the midpoints. Okay, at a distance L between the midpoints. Also, the distance between C and D is A, and then now RAC becomes L, RAD becomes L plus A, RCB becomes L minus A, and RDB becomes L. And then if we simplify the general equation, we find this expression. Okay? So they often ask you to derive the expression for Wiener-Schlumberger and dipole-dipole configuration. Okay, and then if you remember this particular picture, you don't have to remember this expression. You have, you have to remember nothing. These are very standard formulas. You have studied them in school. So if you just remember this formula, at least keep yourself familiar with this formula, you should be able to derive them in no time, right? Is this clear? What is Wiener configuration? What is Schlumberger configuration? What is double dipole configuration? Double dipole is often called dipole dipole as well. Okay, is this clear, everyone? Confirm me, please, someone.
Sir, why do we need the different configurations though?
That we will study right now in a moment. But are the configurations clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Saima, is it clear for you? Can you please confirm all these configurations that we had talked about? Okay, very good. Let me ask a few more. I just want to be sure that everyone is clear. Vishal, is it clear for you? Vishal Nareda, is it clear for you, man? Okay, very good. I'm happy. If the configurations are clear for you, you will be able to answer most of the numericals and questions around it. Okay. So, this is just we talked about in the Wiener configuration, the current and the potential electrode pairs have common midpoint, and the distances between the adjacent electrodes are equal. Okay, and the expression comes like this. In the Schlumberger configuration, the current and the potential pair electrodes often also have a common midpoint, but the distances between the adjacent electrodes differ. Okay, and we talked about it. Let the separation of the current and the potential electrodes be L and A respectively, and RAC is equals to RDB is equals to L minus A by 2, and RAD is equals to RCB L plus A by 2. Substituting, we get this formula. Okay. Now there is one thing. If actually L is very large than A, okay, then you can express this expression, as L square by A. Okay, so you can ignore this minus A square term. Okay, the condition is L is significantly larger than A. Okay, in that case, the formula becomes a bit more simplified. Okay. Of course, in double dipole or dipole configuration, the spacing of the electrodes in each pairs is A, while the distance between their midpoints is L, which is generally much larger than A. Okay, which is generally much larger than A. Note that the detection electrode D is defined as the potential electrode closer to the sink B. In that case, these are the mutual distances and the measured resistivity. Now there is another very important and slowly you will understand the question that Nirul asked: why do we need all these configurations? Okay. Now let us say we will try to define something called apparent resistivity. In the idealized case of a preferably uniform conducting half space between the current flow lines resembles a dipole pattern, and the resistivity determined with 4-electrode configuration is the true resistivity of the half space. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Say, for example, I don't have, two, I don't have two resistive layer. For the timing, just imagine that I have only one layer which has the same resistivity rho 1, everything. Now, and this particular space through which this current is actually flowing is called the half space. Okay? This is called the half space through which the current is actually flowing. Okay, this whole area, like here, you see whole area. This space is called half space. Now, if this would have been only a single layer and with same resistivity, we would have got the true resistivity of the subsurface of that particular layer. Now, what is essentially happening that I have rho 1 and then I have another layer rho 2. So the resistivity that will be measured, is essentially will be like a combined effect of the rho 1 and rho 2, and that is what we call as apparent resistivity. Okay? So, but in real situation, the resistivity is determined by the different lithologies and geological structure. So, maybe inhomogeneous. The complexity is not taken into account while measuring resistivity with a 4-electrode method, which assumes that the ground is uniform. The result of such measurement is the apparent resistivity of an equivalent uniform half space and generally does not represent the true resistivity of any part of the ground. Okay. So while we actually take that measurement, we don't exactly we consider that this is uniform. We consider that this is uniform because the resistivity that we will measure is a single value, right? Is a single value. So we will consider it to be uniform, and that is a simple resistivity value. So now what we are trying to do, we will say we have a particular configuration. This is L, this is D, this is L, okay, and this is D. D is the thickness of the layer. Okay. Now what we will keep on doing, we will keep on increasing L. Okay, so we will start with a smaller L. I mean, the distance between the current electrodes will be smaller, and then we will keep on increasing the. So if I just explain that. A moment. Do you guys have a class immediately after this? That's annoying. Do you guys have a class immediately after this? It doesn't seem you don't. Okay, it seems you don't. So do you mind if I continue the discussion for another 10 minutes after the class?
Sir, some people have class.
Some people have class? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So those who have the class, they can actually leave. I'll still continue for next 10 minutes. You can look through the the recorded lecture, okay? And if you have a question, you can ask me tomorrow, okay? I don't want to just miss the flow of the lecture, okay? I would, because this is a single topic. Just allow me to continue for another 10 minutes. You would the rest who has to leave, please leave. You can catch up in the pre-recorded lecture. Hope you don't mind. Okay. So what you are doing here essentially that So in the first instance, suppose my this is instance one, okay? This is my detecting electrode, and then these are my current electrodes, okay? So this is L1. In the next configuration, I keep my detecting electrode where they have been. I just increase the L. And the third instance, my detecting electrode where they were. I just keep on increasing the distance between the current electrode. Okay, maybe like that. I take around 10 measurements. Okay, so and then what I am trying to do, I am plotting my L by D. Okay, I'm plotting my L by D. So how would I get my D? Well, I don't exactly know what my D is. I don't exactly know what my D is, but we can as a proxy, maybe we can take a particular value, because the D is not going to change. D is not going to change. And what I'm going to do, that essentially means that I'm just increasing L. Okay. And then I am plotting my resistivity value. So when they are very close, you see, when the distance is very close, so suppose, so here is a picture when they're very close, right? So when they're very close, what is happening? I'm only detecting the resistivity, the rho one. Okay. I mean, I'm majorly detecting the resistivity rho one. As I am keeping on increasing L, as I am keeping on increasing L, what I'm doing, I'm increasing my depth as well. Okay, I'm increasing my depth as well. So what I'm observing, that as I am increasing my depth, the effect of rho 2 is keep on increasing. Okay, the effect of rho 2 is keep on increasing, and then I am getting different types of. So this is I'm increasing my L actually, okay? And then I am measuring my resistivity, and then I am getting, depending on how rho 1 and rho 2 are related, I'm getting different types of curves out of them. And these are what we call as type curves. So the idea is you keep on increasing the distance between the current electrodes. Okay, you keep on increasing the L, and then you measure your resistivity data, and then you plot them against your value of length. Okay, and then see how the pattern is, whether the pattern is increasing, whether pattern is decreasing, like that. Okay, and then you try to understand how it is. So if the pattern is decreasing, what does that mean? That rho one is certainly greater than rho 2, because initially I'm getting more resistivity. Okay, and then the resistivity is decreasing simply because I'm getting more interfered by rho 1. And then I till when I will continue till it becomes flat. It becomes flat. Now suppose I have three layers. Okay? Rho 1, rho 2, rho 3. We will see how do they look like in a moment. Okay, so these are called essentially the type curves. Okay, so we just talked about this thing. I don't have to explain. Okay, now vertical electrical sounding. Vertical electrical sounding is all about understanding these rho one, rho two, rho threes. Okay, how the vertical resistivity is actually changing. Okay. So there are four types of sounding curve depending on the resistivity distribution with depth. So these are also called type curves or sounding curves. Okay. Here we are trying to mainly focus on the vertical resolution of the resistivity. So if rho 1, rho 2, and rho 3 resistivities of the subsurface layers, with rho 1 at the top, followed by rho 2 and rho 3. So the first configuration is rho 3 is maximum, rho 2 is intermediate, rho 1 is minimum. That means there is an, with depth, the resistivity increases. The type of sounding curve that we generate is called A-type curve. Okay. And then this is wrongly written. I'll show you what it is. Let me just go here and you will see them. Okay. So there are 4 types of curves: K-type curve, H-type curve, A-type curve, and Q-type curve. And I'll tell you once more again. This is also a very, very important slide and very, very important piece of information with respect to your exams. Okay. So the first one is rho 2 is maximum. So the intermediate layer is actually maximum resistivity. Rho 1 here and rho 3 here. Okay. So how would the type curve look like? The type curve will essentially look something like this. So this is essentially the response between layer, this line is actually the response between line layer 2 and 3, like I have explained in the 2-layer example. And this is the response. This is the response between layer 1 and 2, as I have explained in the 2-layer response curve. And then these two actually would somehow interact with each other, and the resultant type curve will look something like this. And this is what we call as K-type curve, the convex upward curve, K-type curve, where rho 2 is, this signifies that the rho 2 has maximum, resistivity. Now this is concave upward, and it's exactly the opposite. This is the response of the layer 2 and 3, and this is the response of layer 1 and 2. And I can observe a concave upward resultant curve, and this explains that the rho 2, the resistivity of the intermediate layer, the sandwich, the layer which is in between, is minimum. Okay. Now here is a simple configuration: rho 1 less than rho 2 less than rho 3. So rho 3 is maximum. So there is like a resistivity is increasing with depth, and this is the type curve that we will see. This is the type curve between layer 1 and 2, and this is the type curve between layer 2 and 3. But the mix, the response that you will observe looks something like this, and this is what we call a A-type curve. And then a Q-type curve is exactly the opposite. The slope is exactly in the opposite direction, where rho 1 is maximum, then rho 2 is intermediate, and rho 3 is minimum. So this is how the type curve will look like. Okay. So now the idea is I go to the field, okay, and then I do this, that I set up my 4 electrodes, okay, and then I keep on increasing the distance L between the current electrodes. Okay, I keep on increasing the distance L between the current electrodes. So what type of configuration it is? If I just talk about it, what type of configuration it is? I am keeping on increasing the distance L. What type of configuration it is? Can I keep on increasing the distance L in the Wiener configuration? No, right? It has to be either a dipole-dipole configuration or a Schlumberger configuration, right? Is that clear? Right? So it has to be either a Schlumberger configuration or a dipole configuration. The A is constant. I'm just keep on increasing L. Okay. And then with the formula, either if I am doing a Schlumberger configuration, I am calculating the apparent resistivities like this, or if I am using a double dipole configuration, I am calculating my apparent resistivities like this, and then I am plotting them in these curves, right? I'm plotting them. I'm plotting them as I am keep on increasing L. Okay, effective electrode spacing I am keeping on increasing. Okay, and then I'm watching what sort of curve it actually produces. Now, looking at these curves, I'm saying that this is the type of curve, this is the type of configuration you have. Is that clear? Now, what happens if I have more layers? Of course, the curves get complicated. That's all. So, people with more advancement in computing, even you can maybe resolve up to 10 layers or so. Okay. But that's, you don't have to get into such complications for the timing. For your level, it's enough to understand the 3-layer configurations, okay, and their corresponding type curves. Clear, everyone? This is what we call sounding. Sounding means getting the vertical resolution up. Is there a question, guys? Anything you did not understand? I hope you have. Okay. Now, let's look at the Wiener configuration for a moment. So what in Wiener configuration we can do? We have to keep the distances A always the same, right? We can do profiling with Wiener. Then we have to actually, displace all 4 electrodes, to keep the A constant. But that is not what is done generally with Wiener. It can be done, but it's not generally done. What you can do with Wiener is essentially you take this whole configuration. So you first, take it. See? So this is your Wiener. So suppose I have this long area to be surveyed. Okay. And I want to understand how, suppose I have a resistive layer here, rho 1, that changes to something rho 2 here, and I want to understand how along this line the resistivity has changed. Okay, so what I will do, this is my first configuration of Wiener. And the second time, I don't exactly change anything. I just shift this one here. Okay, with the same configuration, I shift it here. The same configuration, I shift it here. Okay. By that, what I will be able to do, I will be able to actually resolve the distance in. I'll be able to resolve the contrast in resistivity along that line, and this is what we call as profiling. Okay. So profiling is actually for the lateral resolution, and sounding is actually for your vertical resolution. We talked about the curves. Now, the last type of resistivity survey that is generally done is called induced polarization method. Are there any questions so far? Okay, very good. It's actually simple. So what happens in induced polarization method? So, Kavin, did you get your answer? Why do we need all these configurations?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So, principles. So when using a standard 4-electrode resistivity spread in a DC mode, direct current mode, if the current is abruptly switched off, okay, listen to this. If the current is abruptly switched off, the voltage difference between potential electrodes doesn't drop to zero immediately. Okay, so here is my what I'm doing in any of this configuration. In any of this configuration, what I'm doing, I'm just switching off this electricity. Okay, I'm switching it off. So ideally, if it would have been a perfect conductor, this Earth surface. What we have seen that the voltage also becomes zero immediately, right? Now that doesn't happen. Instead, what we observe that the voltage decreases in a very particular fashion to become zero. Okay? And that is something you can study also to understand the resistivity characteristics of the subsurface. And this particular study, when you use a DC current, direct current, you immediately switch off your electricity and see how the voltage is essentially changing to zero. When you study that, that is what we call your induced polarization method. So after a large initial decrease of the voltage suffers a gradual decay and can take many seconds to reach a zero value. A similar phenomenon is observed as the current is switched on. It happens also when the current is switched on. After an initial sudden voltage increase, the voltage increases gradually over a discrete time interval to a steady state value. Okay, it reaches a plateau. The ground thus acts as a capacitor. Why does it happen? Because the ground acts as a capacitor and stores electrical charges, that is, becomes electrically polarized. If instead of using a DC source for the instrument of resistivity, a very low frequency AC source is used, it is found that the measured resistivity of the subsurface decreases as frequently as frequency increased. Okay? This is because the capacitance of the ground inhibits the passage of direct currents but transmits alternating currents with increasing efficiency as the frequency rises. Okay? So this is what we wanted to show you. So what you are doing here, this is potential difference. Okay, and you see that this is the potential difference delta VC that you have been seeing. Okay, and then you are switching it off, but it's not essentially becoming zero immediately. There is a sharp drop, but then it slowly decreases to zero. Okay, so the phenomena is called induced polarization. At time t0, the current is switched off, and the measured potential difference after an initial large drop. This is the initial large drop from the drop from the steady state value delta VC decreases gradually to zero. A similar sequence occurs when the current is switched on at time t3 again. Okay. So there is an initial increase. Okay, there is an initial increase, and then of course there is a time that it takes to reach delta VC again. Okay. And this happens because the earth acts as a capacitor. Okay. So the measurement of the decaying voltage over certain time interval as a time domain IP survey. So this is called induced polarization. Okay. So the decaying voltage over a certain time interval is known as a time domain IP surveying. Measurement of apparent resistivity at two or more AC frequencies is known as frequency domain IP surveying. Time domain IP measurements involve the monitoring of decaying voltage after the current is switched off. The most commonly measured parameter is chargeability. You know, chargeability is used, you have used the notation of chargeability in case of a capacitor. The IP equipment is similar to the resistivity apparatus, but uses a current about 10 times that of a resistivity spread. It is also rather more bulky and elaborate. Theoretically, any standard electrode spread may be employed, but in practice, a double dipole, a pole dipole, and Schlumberger configurations are most effective. Okay. Electrode spacing may vary between 3 to 300 meter, with large spacing used in reconnaissance service. The IP method is extremely useful in base metal sulfide exploration, as it has high success rate in locating low grade ore deposits and as disseminated sulfides. Okay. So one thing I did not discuss: why do I need to do this resistivity survey? Why do I need to do this resistivity survey? Okay. Now let us look at this one. Okay. Suppose row 1 and row 3 is kind of similar. Okay. It is general sandstone. And then row 2 is like a deposit which is of lower resistivity. Okay. Sorry, row 2 is a layer of higher resistivity. Some non-metal deposit. Okay. So non-metals have higher resistivity. Metals have lower resistivity. Right. So suppose there is a non-metal deposit which is sandwiched between normal sandstone layers, and I want to essentially picture that whether that is there or not. I'll do such profiling and see if it is there. Okay. Similarly, maybe I am interested. There is a layer which has less resistivity. Maybe row 2, this layer actually represents a conductive layer, right? Less resistivity means conductive layers. Conductive layers, maybe this layer 2 is actually a metal deposit. Okay. In that particular case, this sort of configuration will come. Okay. So why resistivity surveys are done? Resistivity surveys are done for groundwater exploration. I hope I can write. I don't know why this thing keep on happening. I have internet, and hence I am talking in the Google Meet, right? So it doesn't make sense. It looks like you are not connected to the internet. Strange. Okay, let me just put it on because so in Lowry's book, this discussion is very nicely done. In the electrical methods, you will find them. Okay. So in the electrical chapter, you will also find magnetotelluric, of course. But yeah, you will find resistivity as well. Now, why this is used? It's used for number one, groundwater exploration. Okay. Whether there is an aquifer beneath or not, that is what you want to see. Okay. And nowadays, water is becoming one of the most scarce resources, natural resources. So the importance is keep on increasing on water exploration. So groundwater exploration, metal exploration. Of course, non-metal exploration as well. Anything that has resistivity contrast, right? and then of course base metal sulfides. Do you know what are base metal sulfides? Anyone? Anyone knows about base metal sulfides?
No, sir.
No? I've not read. Base metal sulfides are actually nickel, cobalt. Yeah, these are called all base metals. Base metals. They're extremely rare as well, and you want to find them. So that's all I wanted to say around resistivity survey. If you have a question, please ask. I hope it was clear then. I'll see you tomorrow then with the... Yeah, Nirul, you have a question.
Sir, not regarding to this
Okay.
topic, I actually had a question on the thing like the petrology course that is given in environment science bracket, and in geology we have igneous petrology and metamorphic petrology in the subsequent semesters. So is this petrology
Right.
different from igneous and metamorphic, or?
Yeah, so the idea is that is more general. So, I mean, what are you taking? Are you taking geology or earth and environment or?
Sir, actually I am going to take geology, and in the net syllabus there is a petrology in that. So I was confused,
Okay.
like, is that petrology of environment science,
Okay,
or?
now, no. In environment, there is no petrology. Petrology means the study of rocks. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay,
Petrology
sir.
means the study of rocks, and that petrology course actually takes you through both igneous, metamorphic, as well as sedimentary petrology. It's more general course.
Okay,
Okay.
so it is better that in geology we are studying both the igneous and metamorphic.
Yes, absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely,
thank you, sir.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Yeah, you have to take structural geology as well, Nirul,
Yes, sir. That
which
is
I am going to teach next
mandatory.
semester.
Yes, sir.
That is
There are
mandatory.
that
Okay.
are mandatory courses
That is
for geology.
mandatory. Okay, right.
Yes.
I don't exactly know how this whether it is mandatory or not. But it will be
Yes.
fun. Structural geology is very fun. Yeah,
Yes.
it's also nothing you have to mark. It's very mathematical and logical course. Okay,
Yes.
it's really fun.
Yes. Thank you.
Anything else? Srivats, Rahul, Adil, whoever are left, Anand, who is Hemant. Any other question?
Sir, in one earlier, in the pre-recorded lecture,
Yeah.
uh, sir, how did we flatten the CMP gather?
Use a particular velocity model, right? So you need to use the velocity model. You need to know what sort of velocity that particular seismic wave has. Yeah, and then you use that velocity to flatten it. Because what happens if we are essentially increasing the distance between source and the receptor, the time is increasing, right? So the time is increasing because the distance is increasing. What is keeping them constant? The constant thing is the velocity, right? But they are actually in the CMP gather, they are actually sourcing the same point, right? So they cannot be. The vehicle has to be. Why are we doing CMP gather? Because we want to stack all these signals, and make our reflector brighter, right? So they have to come to a particular level. And how can I bring them in a particular level? I have to actually use the right velocity model to bring them to the particular level. Okay.
Okay, sir.
If you are using a wrong velocity, you will see your thing will not be flattened. Some will be going up, some will be going down. Okay, and then you know your velocity is not right.
Okay, sir.
Anything else? Okay, if not, then I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, thank you guys. Bye.